am extremely passionate about. Productivity. It is something that I feel is one of my superpowers. Back in 2020, I had multiple jobs. Every day there was 100 million things to get done, and I couldn't ever get to all of them. I just spend my whole entire day answering emails. This mentality completely crushed my capability. So I came up with Eliminate and Delegate. What can I eliminate? This process, what tasks can we eliminate? What things can we stop doing? Out of what's left, what can I delegate to other people? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Diehard Entrepreneur Stories. I am your host, Devin Ramos, and today I'm here to talk to you about one of the things that I am extremely passionate about. It is productivity. So, if I had to define one of what I believe to be the most impactful, we'll call it meta skills, I would say it'd be productivity, the ability to get more done with less, which involves leverage. And I think a lot of that comes from prioritization, what things we decide to do and when we decide to do them. We call that sequencing. That is something I'm extremely passionate about. It is something that I feel is one of my superpowers. I've had people tell me it's one of my superpowers, and it's something that I'm doubling down on more and more. And so today I'd like to share with y'all 5 tips that I think will help you become more productive. All right, so let's get to it. So first, let's start with what is productivity, and let me tell you what this isn't. I'm not going to give you a bunch of tips to be more efficient or take on more load or more volume. No, what I want you to do is become more overall productive. So what I mean by that, in my mind, if I were to draw a graphic for you, for those of you that can't see, is I have what we call here output. That is our end result. And we see a significant amount of output. And then on the other side, we see the smallest amount of input. So to me, I define productivity as the maximum output with the most minimal inputs. So you can think of it like this. Maybe we have 2 people who both need to sell $1,000. One of them might choose to sell $1,000 by creating a $100 offer and hustling nonstop, faster than the next person over a long period of time, working more hours, and sell 10 of those $100 offers to equal their 1,000. The second person might say, let me see how I can take this $100 offer to a $1,000 offer. Put some thought into who they know that they might be able to close on that $1,000 offer, and then put more effort into getting that $1,000 offer potential client closed at $1,000. So again, thinking through those 2 pictures, maximum output, minimal inputs. So where did this come from? Well, there's a pretty good story behind this. Ultimately, back in 2020, I was deployed to the Middle East. I was working a gig within an embassy, which if you're in the military and you've worked in the embassy and you've also worked in the corporate world, you know that there are some similarities there. I have never worked in the corporate world, so this was the most similar environment I had ever been in to the corporate world. I had a lot of State Department, a lot of federal agencies. I was dealing with a lot of government agencies. I had multiple jobs. So I had sort of an obvious job that I was doing, a position I was filling there. And then I had other things that I was trying to accomplish. So needless to say, every day there was 100 million things to get done, and I couldn't ever get to all of them. And at first I struggled through it, and I could not figure out why I would come into the day with 10 hot items. And instead of closing out my day, hitting 10 of the 10 or 8 of the 10 or even 5 of the 10, I would end my day with now 15 items, and 8 or 9 of the original items weren't accomplished either. And I could not figure out what was happening. There would be times where I would get email after email after email after email, and I'd just spend my whole entire day answering emails, getting people what I thought they needed, and trying to be that person that always showed up, and didn't just always show up, but always showed up on time and got things done faster than the next guy. This mentality completely crushed my capability. I was not near as successful as I could have been if I had understood some of these concepts that I'm about to share with you. And I really understood the bigger picture of what was actually happening. So I went through this whole process where I just completely broke down. I got fed up and I finally said, I am not going to do anything. I'm not going to respond to anybody. And when I did that, nothing really happened. Nothing really shut down. And what it exposed to me was there were a lot of things I was doing that I thought were important because other people would say they were important, but ultimately they were not. They were just urgent. There were a lot of things on my plate that I thought were important, but they really weren't. They weren't needle moving. They were not high leverage. They were just urgent. And so once I started to figure this out, I tried to break things apart and figure out, hey, out of these 10 things that I think I need to do, what are we actually trying to accomplish? And what is maybe like one or two things that I can knock out of this that's going to get us 80% of the way, 90% of the way. And through a period of operating with that sort of mindset, I've uncovered even greater tactics, and I'm building off of what I'll share with you today. All right. So tip number 1, take an inventory. Take an initial inventory if you've never done it, and then take a periodic inventory. So what do I mean by this? Well, first off, I got this from a good friend of mine. His name is Ryan, and I'm sure he got it from somebody else that's been doing this for a while too. So a couple of years ago, I was feeling burnout. I was getting into this grind where I was doing more and more every day, slowly falling back into this rabbit hole. And he said, hey, hold on, just stop. Let's take a look at what you're actually doing. I couldn't really give him a bit of insight into what I was doing. So he said, hey man, just write it down. So what I started doing was grabbing a notebook, setting a timer on my watch to go off every 30 minutes that said, hey, record what you're doing. And I would write, when the timer would go off, I would write in my notebook what I had been doing for the previous 30 minutes. So at 8:30, I would look back and I'd say, okay, I worked out from 8 to 8:30. At 9, if I was still working out, I'd say, okay, I worked out from 8:30 to 9, so on and so forth throughout the day. And then what I did was I took all of that and I sent it over to a virtual assistant I had at the time and said, hey, can you transcribe this into like a spreadsheet for me so I can start to look at this more effectively? And, nowadays you could do that same thing and throw it into a transcriber, get it transcribed to you. There's so many different ways you could do that. I won't cover that here. But needless to say, I just put it into a format that I could do some analysis. And what I found out was I was doing a lot of silly things. I was spending a lot of time driving. I actually decided after doing this, at one point, I decided to build a home gym because I realized I was spending an absurd amount. It was like something like 6 or 7 hours a week just driving to the gym. I was doing a lot of pacing, walking around my house, pacing, thinking, getting distracted, things like that. It uncovered a lot of those things. So some of the key things here when you're doing this, you're going to want to write down everything. When that alarm goes off or that reminder goes off for you to write down everything you've been doing, write down everything. Second thing you want to consider when doing this is you're going to look for patterns. What are the things I see on there consistently? As I said, I saw a lot of driving back and forth to the gym, so much so that it stuck out to me. Third thing you want to consider is not so much what are the things that I'm doing that are right that I want to keep doing, but out of everything I'm doing, what is ineffective and I need to stop doing? So we're more so looking to eliminate things rather than identify the needle moving things, so to speak. Tip number 2, plan. And don't just plan haphazardly or the same day. Plan the night before. And I am adamant on this. When I first started, I said, hey, to each their own. I like to plan the night before. I tried planning the day of. It doesn't lead to my success, but hey, if that's what you want to do, go ahead. Now, I no longer recommend that to anybody. Matter of fact, I tell people, if you're trying to plan the same day, you're setting yourself up for failure. I think about it like this. When I wake up, we have left the gate of our base, so to speak, and we are headed to our target. We are on the mission. We are going, we are rolling. Like that is how I see every day. I could only imagine if I was trying to plan what was going to happen on that mission as I was leaving the gate. That would be the silliest thing ever. We would never do that in the military. We plan the mission days, hours, minutes before we actually launch. In most cases, you would not see us plan en route. Yes, it does happen. There are extenuating circumstances. It's not something that we like to do in the military. So likewise, I don't think that it's in anybody's best interest to wake up and then plan. I think that that plan should be formed prior to going to sleep so you can wake up and only worry about initiating the plan, following the plan, and sticking with it, because that in and of itself is going to be a challenge. So some things to consider when planning. I like to do a brain dump. So anytime that I am planning, for the most part, planning anything, but when I'm planning my day, I'm always doing a brain dump. What is a brain dump? I'm just taking a blank sheet of paper, an empty note on my iPad. I've created PDFs with quad charts to do this, any and all of those things. And I'm just dumping things that are in my head and I'm writing them down to get them onto a sheet of paper where I can no longer have to worry about taking up mental bandwidth and remembering them. And I can also see them in one location. And for me personally, it actually helps me get organized. Second thing that I like to do when I plan, I like to look at what were my wins for that day. So when I do my planning, let's say tonight for tomorrow, I'm going to look at today. I'm going to say, what are my top 3 wins for today? And shooting this podcast will be one of them, I'm sure. And I'm just looking for it. And I don't think too much more about it. Sometimes I have wins that I think are huge, and sometimes they're just small little wins. One thing I will say is quite often my wins involve other people, which I think is pretty cool. Haven't dug into it any more than that at this point. It's just something that I noticed. Third thing I want to consider are, what are my wins for tomorrow? So framing tomorrow, what are the 3 things, if I accomplish tomorrow, I would consider wins? This is where we get into prioritization. Tip number 3, learn to prioritize. This is something that I think everybody can consistently get better at. Like most things, there's a feedback loop. So when shooting a pistol, you're going to shoot, you're going to hit your target, or you're going to miss. You miss, you adjust, you try it again, you hit. You know you're good doing everything you did on that shot, so on and so forth. It's a feedback loop. So it's the same thing with prioritization. Now there's a difference between identifying priority of tasks, priority of projects, and making overall better strategic decisions. These are 2 different things I'm going to separate here. I'm not going to cover the latter. That's something I'm still looking at and trying to figure out how to make better and better decisions and what I'm doing that attribute to my good decisions. So for now, I'm just going to talk about how I would prioritize tasks as they pertain to the mission, right? And for me, the mission is just every day. The mission is, what is the business trying to accomplish? Our businesses each have their mission. I have my own personal mission. Each individual in our company has their own individual personal mission. So that's what I mean by that. All right. So a few things to consider when prioritizing. There are a couple different frameworks I use and how I think about things and how I'm going to address those things. The first, you may have heard, but it is urgent or important or both. So something is urgent, something is important, or something is both urgent and important. Now, if it's neither urgent nor important, then something we don't even consider at all. It really is that simple. Second framework, we use this one in the military. This is when we're talking about things that have to do with the mission. So I relate most with this framework because of the way that I see my life. We say that something is mission critical, mission essential, or mission enhancing. So a lot of times in the military, and for me individually, you'll hear me use these sort of parallels with medicine and medical training that we often do. So I'll give you some examples looking through that lens. So again, just to reiterate, mission critical, mission essential, mission enhancing. So I think about it like this. If somebody were to get into a car crash, any major bleeding, if they weren't getting air through their airway, anything that was going to immediately kill them, aka something urgent and important, puts them in a critical category. That's something that gets addressed above all else. Nothing else matters until that one thing gets addressed. Then we have mission essential, right? So mission essential things, aka important things, are going to be those things that aren't necessarily urgent, but if we don't take care of them, they're going to be a problem. So think about if somebody gets in a car crash, maybe broken bones. Might not be an immediate issue, but it's something we're going to treat. We're going to treat after we get that person stable and make sure that they're not going to lose their life. Then we go to what's essential. And then we have mission enhancing. So if we think about the same idea of a car accident, let's say the rehab and maybe giving somebody peptides or any sort of muscle enhancing supplements or something to really get them built up and rehabilitated faster than normal. So that's sort of how we bucket these things. Now, one of the issues with this sort of framework and this sort of thinking is a lot of times we tend to gravitate to everything is critical. So I would encourage you, while utilizing one of these frameworks, to also really consider, is this thing important? Is this thing just urgent? Is it really urgent and important? And consider the possibility that it really is neither. When I'm thinking about business, for me specifically, when it comes to things involved in a business, oftentimes what I realize are critical things are tied to money. And it makes sense when you have a deeper understanding of what a business actually is, right? We all know that in a business, money is our fuel. When you think about why do people go out of business, they run out of money for the most part. They either can't sell what they have to create cash, or maybe over a long period of time, they've been spending slightly more cash than they're creating, thereby creating negative cash flow and creating debt to a point where it gets unsustainable. It all leads to cash. So oftentimes things that are critical lead to the immediate money. For me, things that are essential tend to align with things that affect the day-to-day to keep things running, to keep things from becoming in what we'd call a critical state. And then enhancing things oftentimes are the things that are going to take us to the next level. The things that we know we need to do to actually build something, to give the business some structure, to give it some sustainability. Tip number 4, removing distractions. So this is a little more tactical, but impactful nonetheless. There are all types of distractions around us constantly on the day-to-day, preventing us from just living a normal day, enjoying time with our family or working in our business or our job or going to the gym or whatever. And there are really two main types of distractions. We have both internal distractions and external distractions. Internal distractions, or more so, our thoughts and the thoughts that we think that get us off track. External distractions are more so the things that draw our attention. Social media, people coming into the office and being loud, things like that. Now, what I've noticed is quite often external distractions can then lead to internal distractions. So external distractions can also trigger internal distractions. So for me, what is the simplest solution? I'll just tell you plainly, cut it all off. Just cut it all off. I think probably the most obvious and most harsh and direct feedback you'll see is to go lock yourself in an area, in a room where nobody can get to you and you can't really get to anybody. When you do something like that, you immediately feel, oh my gosh, there are a lot of things externally pulling at me and internally pulling at me. And it really gives you an idea, gives you a feel for those things. So for the most part, that's what we're trying to accomplish when we say remove distractions. We're just trying to remove stimuli. We're just trying to remove the ability for something to pull us off track. So here are a couple that I'll share with you. I like to keep my office clean. I don't like to keep a lot of items around. It gets cluttered every so often, and I'll go through and I'll just start moving things and throwing things away. For the most part, I like to keep my desk nice and empty. I don't have a bunch of little compartments for this and that and all these paper stacks and stuff like that. Once my desk gets to that point, we remove it all. And the same goes for my office. I have one cupboard in my office. I try to keep anything I need to store in that office within that cupboard, and everything else I try to keep is what we call in the military sanitized as possible. So it just means like nice and clean, not a lot of stuff there, not a lot that can draw your attention. Another thing that I like to do, I'm an avid Apple user, so I love the do not disturb feature they have on the phone. And now at this point, you can customize it. If you have your apps sort of syncing together, you set it on your phone, it'll set it on your computer, it'll set it on your iPad if they're all synced together, things like that. So I love using that feature. I'm a huge advocate of that feature. So when I start my work day, I actually put my phone in work mode where really there's only a couple key people I'll let get through to me. If I'm not working sales, nobody else can. And what that does is that keeps me from being able to be interrupted. And then when I get through the work that I'm doing, that's when I check my phone and I get back to people. So I would like to think that I guess I am indistractable enough to leave my phone on. And if somebody calls me, I just won't answer it because now's not the time for it. But what I've realized over time is that's not how it works. And if somebody calls me and I see it, at a minimum, I'm going to get thrown off. I'm going to get pulled out of what I'm doing. So the simple solution is just to put my phone into work mode where it effectively becomes do not disturb, and only key people can get a hold of me in emergency cases. And I don't have to worry about anything else. And everybody else knows, hey, he'll get back to me when he gets back to me. A lot of times we're the culprit. We blame other people for distracting us, but we're the ones that left ourselves susceptible to them to be distracted. So it really starts there. Third tip, and this is probably my most favorite, is to get social media off of my phone. So there has been a couple of iterations of this. It first started out with sort of a test. So I found that I kept checking social media at these awkward times. So I would be thinking, I need to go set this appointment, or I need to respond to this person. And I would start to do that thing. And then the next thing you know, I'm on Facebook. What I found was happening in one specific instance, I had this prompt that I needed to send this email to this person. So I pulled up my email, I hit compose, I started drafting the email, and I saw somebody else's name in my inbox. When I saw their name, I said, I think they sent me a message on Facebook and I never got back to them. In the middle of the email, I go to Facebook on my browser, I search their name, and I find it in Messenger. I go to respond to them and I realize, I don't have the answer to their question right now, so I'm not going to respond to them. But then I see that somebody just made a post about a house that they had flipped. So I click that post, so on and so forth. As you know, the email never got composed. And that was happening to me probably hundreds of times a day. So I just simply deleted social media. Initially, I felt this peace. It felt great. I was doing good. And then I realized I started to become disconnected. Furthermore, I started getting into creating content, creating this podcast and doing other things. And I realized I wasn't ever posting. And yeah, sure, I could have somebody else post for me. But then I realized I never knew what was going on, what was getting posted. And I wasn't keeping on top of anything. So then I put it back on my phone and I thought, maybe I can hide it. So I hid the app on the phone. It took a couple, 3 or 4 swipes to find it and then access it. For a while, it did deter me and keep me from going onto social media. But eventually, after a week or so, I went back on autopilot. It became sort of subconscious. I knew swipe, swipe, swipe. Okay, there's the Facebook app. Now we're on Facebook. So that wasn't sustainable. So really the final option, and what I still do right now to this day, is I got a second phone. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nobody wants to carry around a second phone. Nobody wants to pay for a second phone. Yeah, But you have to pick and choose. What do you want to sacrifice? Do you want to sacrifice carrying 2 phones? Do you want to sacrifice an extra $150? Or do you want to sacrifice your attention? And I chose the former rather than the latter. I just broke one of my social media phones and got another one. I was able to get an iPhone 12. I know it's not the fanciest thing, for like $170 on eBay. And all I simply do is I hotspot this to my phone so that I have internet when I'm out and about if I need it. But in most cases, I just keep it connected to Wi-Fi and it stays either at my office or it stays at my home. And I pick that phone up at appropriate times when I intend to be on social media. Sometimes I consume, sometimes it's to post content, sometimes it's to check and engage with other people. That's part of my planning, but I set that up beforehand and it seems to work out. Initially, when I started tracking this through the Apple Screen Time app, I was spending like 10 hours a week on social media. Now I've got it down to just about an hour. Which is pretty significant. But not only that, screen time doesn't account for all the things that the social media distraction pulls me away from. So this one's one of my biggest wins. All right, final tip number 5, eliminate and delegate. All right, so you've probably heard the term delegate and elevate. What I get from that, what I've gathered from that, and the way that I have applied that is we're always looking to continue to delegate down to other people and elevate the things that we're doing. So to paint you a picture of this, if we're in the sales game, maybe we start out as a solo sales professional and we're answering all calls that come in. So we're doing the lead intake. But then we know when you answer those calls, you got to set an appointment. So we're doing the appointment setting. But then once those appointments are set, they're going to come up and we need to go on those appointments. So we're doing those appointments, we're closing, we're doing the admin and all those things over and over and over. But over time, the goal is to delegate and elevate. So maybe next we bring somebody in and we're no longer answering the phones because we can train somebody else to answer the phones and we can delegate. So all phone calls go to them. And that allows us to do more appointment setting and go on more appointments and close more sales. But then all of a sudden our plate becomes full because we're setting so many appointments constantly. So then we find somebody else and we delegate appointment setting. So now we have somebody answering the phones, doing our lead intake. We have somebody setting the appointments, and then we're focusing all our time and attention on attending those appointments and closing those sales. That's the idea behind elevating and delegating. And while I think that that is a great concept, I've sort of realized for me, it keeps me in the cycle of delegating over and over and over, getting people at capacity, past capacity, overloaded, and then one of them burns out. Because the more that you delegate, the more of a management requirement you incur on somebody, probably you. And so what was happening to me is I would delegate things more and more and more. And pretty soon I wasn't even tracking what each person was doing, what their load was, what their capacity was. And if I was tracking that, well, that in and of itself would be taking up bandwidth. So it wasn't so much about how much can I delegate and elevate, but it was about, for me, a constant evaluation of what are we actually doing? So I came up with eliminate and delegate. The first thing I'm always looking to do is eliminate something. So rather than delegating lead intake and then delegating appointment setting, maybe lead intake is something we just don't need to do and we can skip it. Or maybe appointment setting is something we don't need to do and we just skip it. Maybe we can merge both of them. So we can have one person that's answering the phone, then setting the appointment right away. Maybe this whole idea of answering phones first, pushing them over to a setter, setting appointments next, is just taking up unnecessary bandwidth, and we're being super inefficient, as an example. So I am constantly looking at what can I eliminate? What can I eliminate in this process? What tasks can we eliminate? What things can we stop doing? And then out of what's left, what can I delegate to other people? All right. Well, there you have it. Those are our 5 tips. Just to recap here, Make sure you're taking an inventory of everything that you're doing. Do this initially if you've never done it. And then once you do it, make it a habit and do it periodically to give yourself a check. Number 2, make sure that you are planning, and not just planning the day of, but the day before, and being thoughtful in the things that it's going to take for you to win. Number 3, let's learn to prioritize. There are a few different frameworks and ways to accomplish this, but ultimately it's about making the best decision, choosing wisely on what we're going to give our attention, and then sequencing it, making sure it's in the right order. Number 4, making sure that we are actively looking to remove distractions, whether that's using do not disturb on our phone or an equivalent, or getting social media completely off our phone onto another phone, or locking ourselves into a room where nobody can really bug us. We need to be actively thinking about removing distractions. And tip number 5, eliminate, then delegate. Well, there you have it. My 5 productivity tips. I hope they've been helpful for you. Again, these are something you're going to want to work at to continue to become better, more productive, because remember, ultimately we want the maximum output for the minimal inputs. Until next time, see ya.